If everybody owes money, who exactly is getting paid? The world is now $315 trillion in debt. That's not a typo. $315 trillion. Nearly 3 times the size of the entire global economy. If you owed triple your annual income, your bank would foreclose, your credit cards would be cancelled, collectors would be calling. But when nations do it, markets stay calm, investors keep lending. Interest rates remain manageable. How is that possible? First, who's actually getting paid? Let's walk through where the money actually flows. When the US Treasury issues a bond, who buys it? Mostly American institutions, banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve itself. Out of that $38 trillion, about half is publicly held. Roughly 2/3 of those investors are American. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, sits in foreign hands. Japan holds around $1 trillion, China about $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, Belgium. So when people say the US is in debt to China, that's true, but only for roughly 2% of the total. Most of the debt America owes is to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes that fund interest on those bonds, and that interest flows right back into American retirement accounts, bank profits, and insurance reserves. It's a circular mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly a reflection of the same system. Most people think debt flows to foreign powers. Insiders know it's a closed loop. So how can the world's countries owe $315 trillion, almost 3 times the value of the entire global economy? Because modern debt isn't designed to be repaid. It's designed to be believed in. The goal was never to eliminate debt. The goal is to keep it sustainable, serviceable, and desirable enough that the system never loses confidence. The moment confidence breaks, the numbers start mattering. What keeps this $315 trillion system alive isn't mathematics, it's psychology. And once you understand that mechanism, you'll see why the biggest threat to the global economy isn't the debt itself. It's the belief that holds it together. So how did we get here? In 1694, England created something revolutionary. Not just the Bank of England, but a new kind of promise. Lend us money now, and we'll pay you interest forever. The principle? We'll worry about that later. And it worked because lenders believed the promise. The British government had credibility, tax revenue, and empire. When you lent to the crown, you weren't just buying a piece of paper. You were buying into a system backed by the world's most powerful nation. That belief was the real collateral. Not gold, not land. Belief. And here's where it gets interesting. Over the next 3 centuries, that same mechanism spread globally. France adopted it, Germany, the United States, Japan. By the 20th century, government bonds weren't just a way to fund wars, they were the foundation of the entire financial system. But something fundamental changed in 1971. President Nixon broke the link between the dollar and gold. Before that moment, every dollar was theoretically backed by physical metal sitting in a vault. After 1971, the dollar became what economists call fiat currency, backed by nothing physical, just by government decree and government promises. That decision unlocked something unprecedented: unlimited borrowing power. Because if money is just a promise, and debt is just a promise, then creating more debt is the same as creating more money. The constraint disappeared. Governments could now borrow as much as they wanted, as long as someone believed they'd get paid. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. That belief doesn't require actual repayment. It just requires the appearance of sustainability. Think about it like this. When Japan's debt hit 250% of its GDP, economists predicted disaster. Bond yields should have spiked. Investors should have fled. But neither happened. Yields stayed near zero. Investors kept buying. Why? Because the Japanese government kept making interest payments. On time. Every time. They never paid down the principal, they just kept refinancing. Rolling over old debt with new debt. And as long as the payments kept flowing, belief held. The system kept turning. That's the mechanism. Not repayment, refinancing. Like a heart that must keep beating, stop, and everything stops with it. The global financial system must keep refinancing to survive. The beat equals survival. The moment it stops, confidence collapses. And when confidence collapses, the numbers start to matter. Let's walk through exactly how this works. The United States owes $38 trillion. Every year, a portion of that debt matures. Bonds come due. The Treasury must pay back the principal. But here's what actually happens. The Treasury doesn't pay it back from tax revenue. It issues new bonds. Investors who held the old bonds buy the new ones. The debt gets rolled over. Refinanced, the principal never actually leaves the system. The only real payment, the actual product, is interest. About $1 trillion per year. That interest flows from taxpayers to bondholders, from the Treasury to pension funds, banks, insurance companies, and foreign governments. And here's the kicker. Those bondholders take that interest income and use it to buy more bonds. The money flows in a circle. From government to creditors and back to government, over and over. It's a closed circle, and as long as that circle keeps spinning, the system holds. But there's a second force at work, one that makes this entire mechanism possible: the Federal Reserve. When private investors don't buy enough bonds, the Fed steps in. It creates new dollars out of thin air and buys Treasury bonds directly. Economists call this quantitative easing, but what it really means is the government is lending to itself. The Treasury issues a bond. The Fed buys it. The Treasury gets cash to spend. The Fed holds the bond as an asset. And the interest payments, they flow from the Treasury to the Fed and then right back to the Treasury as profit. It's not just circular, it's self-reinforcing. And here's where these two forces compound. Private refinancing plus central bank support creates a system where debt can grow indefinitely. As long as confidence holds. That word again, confidence. Because the entire structure depends on one thing: investors believing they'll get paid. Not the principal, just the interest. The moment that belief cracks, everything changes. We've seen it happen. Greece in 2010. Investors panicked. They stopped buying Greek bonds. Interest rates spiked from 5% to 40% almost overnight. The government couldn't afford to refinance. They ran out of options. The European Central Bank and IMF stepped in with a bailout. But it came with conditions: austerity, tax hikes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For an entire generation, the word bailout became another word for sacrifice. When confidence breaks, the creditors suddenly become visible. The rating agencies, the bondholders, the institutions that hold entire nations by the throat. But here's the paradox. For countries like the United States, confidence hasn't broken yet. Why? Because for now, the US dollar isn't just America's currency. It's the world's. It's the global reserve currency. Oil, gold, wheat, nearly every major commodity is priced in dollars. Central banks stockpile them. Most international trade settles in them. That gives the US a structural advantage. The world needs dollars to function. And once they have those dollars, the safest place to store them is in US Treasury bonds. In other words, America prints the global currency, and the world loans it right back. We may be watching that slowly change in real time, but for now it's working. So even as US debt has climbed to $38 trillion, roughly 120% of GDP, demand for Treasury bonds remains strong, around 2 to 3 times supply. Not because investors think the principal will be repaid, but because they need the asset. And here's what most people will never hear on the news. That need creates its own form of confidence, a self-fulfilling cycle. Investors believe US bonds are safe, so they buy them. That demand keeps interest rates low. Low rates make the debt sustainable. Sustainability reinforces confidence, and confidence drives more demand. It's not mathematics. It's psychology creating its own reality. And here's the part they really don't want you to know. The numbers themselves are almost irrelevant. $315 trillion sounds insane. 3 times global GDP sounds unsustainable. But sustainability isn't just about ratios, it's about belief. As long as creditors believe they'll get paid, they keep lending. As long as they keep lending, governments keep refinancing. As long as governments keep refinancing, the system keeps turning. The debt doesn't need to shrink, it just needs to be believable. Think about what happened in 2020. The global economy shut down. Tax revenues collapsed. Governments around the world borrowed unprecedented amounts. The US borrowed $3.8 trillion in a single year, nearly 20% of its entire economy. Did markets panic? Did bond yields spike? Did investors flee? No. They bought more bonds because they believed governments would keep paying interest. And as long as the interest payments kept flowing, confidence held. That's the engine, not the return of principal, not even sustainability in the traditional sense, just the collective belief that the system will keep functioning. And that belief is reinforced by something concrete: interest payments. Every year, the US pays roughly $1 trillion in interest on its debt. That money flows to institutions around the world. Pension funds that pay retirees, insurance companies that cover claims, banks that fund operations, foreign governments that finance their own spending. Those institutions depend on that interest income. They've built their entire business models around it. If the US stopped paying interest, if it defaulted, those institutions would collapse. So they have an incentive to keep the system alive, to keep believing, to keep lending. It's not just psychology, it's rational self-interest creating psychological stability. But there's a limit, a breaking point, and it's not a number, it's a moment. The moment investors stop believing they'll get paid. The moment confidence cracks. For Greece, that moment came when the government couldn't make a payment. For Argentina, it's happened multiple times. Default follows default, confidence never fully recovers. But for the United States, that moment hasn't come yet. And the system is designed to prevent it from ever coming. Because if confidence in US debt breaks, it's not just an American crisis, it's a global crisis. Every pension, every bank, every market on Earth is built on the assumption that US Treasury bonds are safe. That assumption creates its own protection. Too much depends on it. The world can't afford for US confidence to break. So the system perpetuates itself, not through conspiracy, not through manipulation, through collective necessity. Every investor needs a safe asset. US bonds are that asset, so they keep buying. That demand keeps yields low. Low yields keep the debt sustainable. Sustainability keeps confidence high. And high confidence ensures more demand. It's a loop, a perpetual motion machine powered by belief. And here's what you need to understand. The next time you hear someone panic about the national debt, about the $315 trillion global debt mountain, about unsustainable numbers, remember this. The numbers don't matter as much as you think. What matters is whether people believe they matter. As long as confidence holds, debt can grow indefinitely. Governments can refinance forever. Interest payments can flow in circles. The heart can keep beating. The system doesn't break because the numbers get too big. It breaks when belief collapses. And that's the mechanism politicians and economists rarely explain out loud. Because once you see it, you realize the entire global economy runs on shared psychology. On collective faith. The debt isn't just money owed, it's a promise that keeps getting renewed. A subscription that never expires. As long as everyone keeps believing in tomorrow's payment, today's balance doesn't matter. That's not how you were taught economics works, but it's how modern debt actually works. The engine isn't fueled by mathematics, it's fueled by confidence. And as long as that confidence holds, $315 trillion is just a number on a screen. But the moment confidence cracks, that's when the numbers suddenly become very real. That's when panic replaces calm. That's when the heart stops beating. And now you understand what keeps it running. Not logic, not sustainability. Belief. If you found this valuable, hit subscribe. We publish fresh content several times a week to help you understand the economy and protect and grow your wealth. And keep the momentum going. Watch Why the Stock Market Hasn't Crashed Yet. What they don't want you to know. It's on the screen. If you want to get your financial house in order, I've put some links in the description that may help. Check it out. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.